Hey guys, Tom here again from SynthHacker.com. I was recently playing around with one of the chord presets from my Solette for Serum bundle. I ended up modifying it and arriving at a pretty cool chord sound, so I thought I'd share how I made it. Towards the end of the video, I'm also going to be briefly covering some of the other elements in the track, like the drums and bass synth. But let's first start with the chords and open an initialize patch in Serum. If you want to follow along with the same MIDI chords I'm using, you can download all of my tutorial MIDI free through the link in the description. We're going to get the basic shape of our synth set straight away using a basic Moog saw waveform and setting our amplitude envelope to a pluck-like shape. When I first made the patch, I was trying to emulate some of the wide sounding key sounds commonly heard from analog polysynths. The way analog synths achieve width is through a spread parameter, which pans the individual notes across the stereo image. I recently discovered that you can create a similar effect in the modulation matrix of Serum by modulating the pan parameter of an oscillator with the note on random mod source. This modulation source works by creating a random modulation value every time a new note is triggered. As you can tell, this has a distinctly different sound than if we were to just add unison for every note. To add to the plucky character we're going for, let's set up a 24 dB low pass filter and create a separate envelope to modulate it. Again, this envelope is going to have a short decay, but we're also going to extend the release a little so we still get some high frequencies present in the tail of the sound. We're also going to apply the same envelope to the amplitude of the noise oscillator to add a subtle inharmonic texture to the sound. I used one of my own custom noise samples from the SynthHacker Essentials bundle, but obviously feel free to experiment with whichever samples you wish. At this point, the basic elements of the sound are here. I did, however, play around with quite a bit of processing to add some extra character. Firstly, I used Serum's dimension expander effect to create a fuller and wider sound. To help towards the same purpose, I also used a subtle amount of Serum's chorus. Before finally adding a little bit of hall reverb to add a sense of depth and space. You could of course use a dedicated reverb plugin if you wish, but in the context of the mix, I was happy with how Serum's reverb sounded. Moving on to external processing, one of my favorite effect types to use on chord sounds at the minute is downsampling, for which I've mostly been gravitating towards D16's Decimort plugin. This just adds a really nice crunchy texture to the sound and is a very popular technique with artists like Medicine, for example. To add a little more lo-fi texture, I also used a bit of RC20 with a modified version of the default vinyl preset. Finally, I added a little sidechain compression from the kick to help towards the pump-in rhythm of the track. So with our chord sound set, let me briefly also just cover the rest of the arrangement, including the drums and bass synth. As you can hear, I was going for kind of an indie dance type groove that had a somewhat organic sound but still had some punch. The kick drum was just a super simple patch from the drum synth Big Kick with a little soft clip in from DS10. The layered snare and clap was made up of a simple snare sample from one of my custom battery kits, along with some roomy live sounding claps from one of my favourite new plugins, El Clapo. I glued these layers together a little by grouping and compressing them. The first hi-hat rhythm I started with was a live one using Superior Drummer 3, some drum shaping with DS10, and a bit of soothe to tame some of the harsher frequencies. The offbeat hat that comes in was just a simple open 909 from battery with some pitch drift from Wolf compressor. When you're triggering a static sample, I find that pitch drift can be a really easy way to give it a less repetitive and more interesting character. Finally, I just added a simple shaker loop and a 16th note hi-hat sample to pick up the pace of the groove a little. Both elements were sidechained, and the shaker loop also used a bit of Echo Bode's wide chorus preset to add some width and give it a fuller sound, while DS10 was used to tighten up the loop by reducing a lot of the sustain. Finally, all the drums you heard were grouped together and processed with some further compression and transient shaping. So moving on to the bass synth, I really just wanted something that would mostly support the rhythm of the chords, providing a full sounding low end to the groove. The patch itself couldn't be simpler, essentially just being a single square wave oscillator routed through a 24 dB low pass filter with some cut-off modulation from an envelope. The square wave I used was a custom one from my free bundle that I modeled from a Moog analog synth, which when combined with Serum's Moog modeled filter has quite a nice analog sound to it. All of the processing on the bass sound was done externally, using an audio effect rack combined with Isotope stereo imaging plugin to split the sound into low and high frequencies. This is a technique I've covered a lot in the past and allows more freedom to experiment with different plugins while keeping the low end intact. I added some distortion using the preset Round and Fuzzy from Output's plugin Thermal, set to around 50% wet. Additionally, I added some chorus using one of my go-to plugins, Chorus LX, which is a free plugin that emulates the chorus from a Juno 60 analog synth. Mix-wise, I also just used FabFilter Pro Q to dynamically EQ the bass using the kick drum as a sidechain input. This is a technique I use pretty much all the time now when mixing the low end of a track. It's a really effective way to get your kick and bass to sit together in a more precise way. Having said that, to add to the pumping groove of the track and have the bass feel more aligned with the chords, I did use a subtle amount of sidechain as well. Finally, the last element that slowly makes its way into the track is a simple pad sound from possibly my favorite virtual analog synth, Yuhi's Repro 5. The patch itself is essentially just a triangle oscillator with a quieter square oscillator layered an octave above, routed through Repro 5's onboard delay and reverb effects with quite a high mix amount. I then also just added some pitch drift with Wolf compressor, sidechained the pad to the kick, and also rolled off some of the low end. From here, I just added some simple automation to the filter cutoff and resonance of the original chord synth, which brings us to the final result. So there we have it. I really hope you took something useful away from this video, whether it be from the breakdown of the chord synth or even just something from the rest of the arrangement. Let me know if you have any questions about anything I've covered here, or even if you have suggestions for other video ideas. If you want to get your hands on some quality Serum presets created by me, I'd love for you to check out my Solette for Serum pack if you haven't already. You can hear the audio demos over at synthhacker.com. It's worth mentioning I also just added a few of the presets from the pack for you to demo as part of the free bundle, along with all of my tutorial MIDI and custom wavetables. To stay up to date with new videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. And as always guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.